Michael sat in the corner of the café, the warm hum of chatter and the aroma of fresh coffee wrapping around him like a fragile comfort. Across from him, little Emma swung her legs beneath the chair, humming softly as she nibbled on a muffin. These small pockets of peace meant the world to him, rare escapes from the long hours of double shifts that seemed to drain everything but his love for her. He lifted his coffee cup, savoring the moment, when his eyes caught something that tugged at his instincts. At a table near the window, a young woman sat stiffly, her hands clenched around her phone as though it were a lifeline. She kept glancing at the door, her shoulders tense, her breathing shallow. Michael's gaze followed hers just as the bell above the café door chimed and a man entered. There was something about his presence, loud, heavy, uninvited, that immediately shifted the air. Without hesitation, the man slid into the seat beside the woman, far too close, ignoring the clear boundary she seemed desperate to protect. The woman forced a tight smile, but her eyes betrayed her unease. They darted around the room, searching, pleading, as if silently asking for someone, anyone, to notice. Michael felt a pang in his chest. He wasn't a stranger to hardship or fear, but watching someone so vulnerable and cornered stirred something deeper. He could sense it in the way she hunched slightly, shrinking into herself, trying not to make a scene yet clearly desperate to be seen. Michael tried to look away, convincing himself it wasn't his business. But Emma tugged gently at his sleeve, her soft voice breaking the moment. "Daddy," she looked scared, she whispered, her wide eyes fixed on the woman. Michael followed his daughter's gaze and saw it too, the trembling fingers tapping nervously against her necklace, the quick, darting glances that always seemed to land on him. Then it happened, subtle, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention. The woman touched her necklace again, her eyes locking with his for a fleeting second. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A signal. Michael's chest tightened. He had seen enough of the world to recognize fear hidden behind a polite smile. The man beside her leaned closer, speaking low, his words unheard but heavy with intimidation. The woman's shoulders tensed further, and she angled her phone as though she was searching for help she couldn't find on the screen. Michael's instincts roared louder than his doubts. He wasn't a cop, not a fighter, just a single dad holding his daughter's hand in a cafe. But Emma's whisper still echoed in his ears, and the woman's silent plea burned in his mind. His pulse quickened, his coffee forgotten. In that moment, he realized this wasn't about being brave for himself. It was about being the kind of man his daughter believed he was, the kind of person the young woman needed right now. She had asked without words, and he knew he couldn't stay seated any longer. Michael's chair scraped softly against the wooden floor as he stood, his heart thudding so loudly he feared everyone could hear it. Emma looked up at him, her small hand tightening around his. He bent down, whispered, "Stay right here, sweetheart," and gave her a reassuring smile he barely felt himself. Then, with every ounce of courage he could gather, he walked toward the young woman's table. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice steady though his palms were damp. He forced a warm, familiar smile as if greeting an old friend. "Sorry I'm late. Emma's been asking when you'd come." The woman's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before relief flooded across her face. She caught on instantly. "Oh. Michael," she replied shakily, playing along. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten." Michael slid into the chair opposite her, his presence creating a barrier between her and the man. The stranger's eyes narrowed, sharp with suspicion. "Who are you?" he muttered, leaning back slightly, his tone edged with irritation. Michael kept his gaze locked on the woman, refusing to acknowledge the hostility. "Traffic was terrible," he continued casually, as if nothing were wrong. "But we're here now." The woman nodded quickly, clutching her phone with trembling fingers. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Michael's heart pounded, but he didn't waver. He wasn't a hero by nature, yet at that table, he chose to be one, because someone needed him to be. The tension in the cafe grew heavy, like a storm cloud ready to burst. The man shifted in his seat, glaring at Michael, clearly unhappy with this sudden intrusion. His voice lowered to a dangerous edge. "You don't belong here. Leave." Michael didn't flinch. He leaned slightly forward, his tone calm but firm. "Actually, she's with us. And I think it's time we go." He rose slowly, extending a steady hand toward the young woman. For a brief second, she hesitated, then slipped her trembling fingers into his, clinging as though she'd been waiting for that lifeline all along. With Emma now standing beside him, Michael positioned himself between the woman and the man, shielding her as they moved toward the door. The stranger muttered something under his breath, angry, sharp, but he didn't follow. The café manager, who had noticed the exchange, stepped closer, his watchful eyes warning the man to back down. The woman's steps were shaky, her breath uneven, but each stride away from that table seemed to lift a weight off her shoulders. When they reached the door, she turned briefly, her eyes glistening with gratitude and relief. The man was left sitting alone, his power broken by something he hadn't expected, an ordinary dad refusing to look away. Outside, the cool air rushed against them, carrying with it a sense of escape. The woman let out a shaky laugh, half sob, whispering, "You just saved me." Michael nodded softly, but in his heart, he knew it was something far bigger than that. Outside the café, the world seemed quieter, calmer, as though it had been holding its breath with them. The young woman wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling but sincere. "I don't even know your name," she whispered, "but I'll never forget what you did today." Michael gave a gentle smile, shaking his head. "You don't have to. Just, stay safe." She pressed her hand over her heart, as if to hold on to the moment, before walking away into the bustling street with a newfound steadiness in her step. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve, her big eyes filled with awe. "Daddy," she said softly, "you're like a superhero." Michael looked down at her, his chest tightening, not from pride, but from something deeper. He hadn't acted because he was fearless. He'd acted because he couldn't let fear win, not in front of his daughter, not when someone so clearly needed help. He crouched to Emma's level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, you don't need to be a superhero to do the right thing. Sometimes, just being there for someone, that's enough." Emma nodded thoughtfully, holding his hand as they walked away. As they disappeared into the crowd, Michael felt a quiet strength settle inside him. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, but today, he had given someone safety, and taught his daughter the most important lesson of all, that kindness and courage, even in small moments, can change a life forever.